Hi guys, what's going on, and welcome back to another episode of Total War Arena. So today we are back with the Carthaginian Cavalry, looking at the Carthaginian Cavalry. that's actually what they're called. So this is the Tier 6 Carthaginian Cavalry. That's going to get confusing. So yeah, these guys are a little bit different to the earlier units. The units before, like the Tier 5, the Amazighi tribesmen, were quite a really light cavalry, designed mobility, but a quite light combat ability, designed to get around the map quickly. Played a lot like the barbarian cavalry. But these guys, the Carthaginian cavalry, sort of move on to the more classic heavy cavalry. They almost play a little bit like the Roman equites, although obviously they lack things like Oath of Perseverance and their damage is a little bit down. But as you can see, they've got reasonable armour. They look pretty cool, very nice little desert warriors. I love the models, particularly the horses with like I don't know what their ears are poking through. They've almost got hats. And the desert shields and everything like that, which is very cool. I've not got these guys fully upgraded yet. I've got a couple of shields and some body armour still to do. But from a mobility and stat point of view, how do they play? Well, the main thing initially noticed is their movement speed is very much down compared to the previous tiers. So we've got movement speed base is 6.9 compared to, let's have a quick look at what the Amazighi were. They had a base movement speed of 7.8. So that's quite a big difference in terms of mobility. It's also true on acceleration, turn speed, that sort of thing. I think it also lower as well, which is kind of to be expected really from a heavier cavalry, which is how they're playing out. However, in terms of other areas, they're a lot better. The survivability is pretty good. They've got increased body armor. They've actually really got proper body armor rather than just sort of cloth. They've got these sort of like leather tunics they've got on. And once upgraded, this gets even better as well. We get +9 body armor from that. And then I think we probably get a bit from the leggings as well. We do from the greaves. And then they've got really high defense, quite good charge deflect and everything. And they've also still got good charge impact and good melee attack. Not amazing in melee combat. They're not quite as good as the Romans. They're not like the equites, who can get in a fight and really hold their own, particularly with those perseverance to give them that defense increase. They're not that good, but they are pretty decent. Other than that, there's not all that much to say about them. The main thing I love about these guys more than anything is the raised shields ability. So this gives them for very little penalty, you get a slight decrease to view range, reload time. I'm not sure what possible impact reload time is going to have on cavalry, charge impact and defense. So obviously it's not something to use once you're entering combat, but if you're moving up to enemy archers, this gives you a plus 50% missile block chance. That's huge. It almost makes you not invincible to missiles, but it greatly reduces the amount of damage you take. It means you can pass through those gaps, pass by enemy missile units without really worrying too much. And it's a toggle. It's only an 8-second cooldown. So if you toggle it on, once you've toggled it on, within say 8 seconds, you can knock it back off again and go back into normal combat. So that's a brilliant little ability. That is. You still get the proprietary charge, the unit charge, which can occasionally be useful if you want to cover ground, that sort of thing. And obviously with Hasdruble, you obviously gets the flying column. So you have got 2 charges still to work with. Obviously, like all my units, I'm running them with consumables. I'm just using the imported wild apples for the charge impact, which I think is good. I kind of like having the extra charge impact. It gives you sort of that extra ability to win engagements when you're facing off against other cavalry. The one that has the higher charge impact ends up being the one that does the damage. And then the impact damage is how much damage is done if you win that engagement. So if you charge against Greek cavalry, they'll have a really high charge impact and you'll lose. But against most other cavalry, particularly with the consumables, you stand a reasonable chance of winning. Plus you get the movement speed bonus, which these guys desperately need given their current base movement speed. So without further ado, let's hop into a replay and see how we got on. So, as I'm sure you've learnt by now, my replays don't always pan out amazingly, and this is to some extent true at this one, but I thought it gives a reasonable overview of the cavalry, and I think it's probably sometimes as interesting to see the mistakes I make rather than just playing 100 games and me picking the most perfect game to show you guys. I can always do that, but 1, I don't really have enough time, and 2, I think it's kind of interesting to see my mistakes. It's kind of interesting, I'm noticing from the start after people were commenting about blobbing with cavalry, which is right, you shouldn't really be blobbing with cavalry, it's just probably a bad habit I got into, and I struggle to micromanage cavalry because of the extra speed, so I've immediately formed up into a nice large blob in this game. So I'm just moving around, as we don't know what we're going to encounter yet, so I'm just sort of moving up, heading vaguely towards this spotting point, but we've got quite a lot of friendly infantry, so I feel relatively secure. Just see what we see. So we notice the enemy captures this, so we've been spotted. And we spot some enemy legionaries in the base down here, and some elephants. So I'm sort of thinking, well, I've got these guys. Obviously, I don't want to tackle equivalent tier Roman heavy infantry, and I certainly don't want to be tackling the elephants. I've not even got any javelins I can throw at them anymore, because these guys, that's something I perhaps didn't point out earlier, these guys no longer have the javelins that the Amazighi tribesmen had, so that's quite a shame. Then I notice the friendly artillery coming in, doing quite a lot of damage to these Romans. So I think, okay, not only does it get me a little bit of spotting points, which never does any harm, gets great damage of it, but I thought it's well worth trying to keep spots on these guys, which is why I'm sort of loitering around here, because we're actually doing quite a bit of damage to them from the artillery, which is good, which I'm quite pleased with. So I just sort of loiter around here, trying to keep spots on them all the time. We get a little bit of extra points from doing from the spotting damage of this. They throw some javelins at us. I hadn't got my raised shields up, so it did do a little bit of damage to it. Obviously, if we had that up, that would have really reduced the amount of damage we took from the enemy missiles. Now, I hadn't noticed at this point, which is an error on my part, as is so often the case, it's the fire coming out the forest over here. So obviously it makes sense, given that we can see arrow shots coming out here, that there's enemy arrow infantry there. So I try and sort of move out of the way of the fire, now I'm being targeted, and then realise there's a good opportunity here to get up. Again, this is really, probably the worst mistake I made is I didn't do raised shields here. I could have really negated the amount of damage I took from this archer vault, this barrage going on, if I had just raised my shields. A plus 50% missile block chance would have made a huge difference. But because I'm a moron, I didn't do that. And yes, so we now take quite a bit of damage getting close to these archers. I use a charge to try and get in closer. Thankfully, we've got that second charge. Having two charges is kind of useful, and we reach the archers and slam right into them all. Do a good amount of damage. The one thing I find, these guys don't kill quite as quickly or efficiently as the Romans do. You know, the Romans get in amongst the archers, they just cut them down so quickly. Yet these guys really don't. So because they're trying to pull some of their archers out, I try and push a unit through to gain into these archers. I'm trying to keep sort of one unit engaging these guys here and get another unit to push through to chase these guys, but it just didn't really seem to push through properly. I was trying to get them to come out to get round, and it just didn't really pan out. Got caught on all the models around this edge of this sort of burn thing, and I realised that they've got away because they've got these friendly hoplite units there defending. So I just kill off this remaining unit and accept that we've done some damage to them at least. So I look up here, just finishing off an enemy fight over here. Not really a lot I can do, but I might as well go and, you know, get a few extra points if I can while I'm deciding what else to do. Thankfully the enemy elephants seem to be dead. We get in, we cause some routes because we surprised their left flank, which gives them a massive morale decrease. So a little bit of help we gave, but not a great deal. So then I'm carrying back on. So I get moving again, get caught up in some friendly Roman infantry. So I'm about half health on all my units. So still quite an effective fighting force. And we've got these legionaries here. I let them use their heavy infantry charge, which they waste, before I then turn back around. He says he turns back around like that and charge into them. I know I had enough support with me, plus when it's only one unit on its own like that, particularly a depleted health unit, when you hit them with enough infantry you normally get all flanks on them at the same time, and that's enough just to get them route to route, which we did, and then we just cut them down pretty easily. It's good amount of damage we managed to get there for taking very, very little losses. You can always overwhelm small little infantry units like that when you've got enough cavalry, particularly quite a strong heavy cavalry like these, who play more like the Roman cavalry than anyone else. So I come down here. Obviously, we've got to watch out for the infantry stakes. So I come with here with the intention of coming down here. Now, you might be able to see from here my almost mistake, but I managed to avoid it. You can see the little bit of dust starting to spring up around here. And this is probably a really good tip for any new players or people who don't know this. So this dust represents a building project. So this infantry unit here, which we can see has stakes set as a consumable, is building. So I come round with the intention of charging into them. I thought I could probably overwhelm this unit and then get into the archers that they've got over here. But as you see, I turn and then the stakes pop up in front of me. Ugh! So very, very close. But I just, quick on my fingers that time for a change, I managed to realise my mistake and quickly turn back round. Again, I'm still forgetting about raised shields. It's a really hard habit to break when you've never had it before on a cavalry. So that's something I need to work on. So then here, I try and be clever here, and it sort of doesn't really pan out for me. So I know what's my situation. So we've got a hoplite unit, basically, that is engaged against these Roman infantry, or if not engaged, at least being threatened by the Roman infantry, so can't really easily move. and it's the same player, so I know he's got quite a lot to deal with. He's got to deal with me on this hoplite unit, and he's also got to deal with these guys and the Romans, so it seems like quite a good opportunity to try and get some flanks on this guy here. So this is where I split up my units. I've got time, so I send one out. I think I might send two out actually, and I send one in on a charge, which is fine. The other one sort of gets engaged, so then I try and send these ones out in a flanking. Obviously I start to rack up quite a bit of losses here, and these guys kind of cleverly actually turn round, which is a good move on their part, but we get a bit of charge in and we're up to sort of 7,000 damage, and I've now got them on both flanks. But this is where the darn hoplites are really annoying. They end up forming up and pushing through. I think they activated hold the line maybe, or them for whatever reason we just didn't get any activated flanks on them. So it just didn't really work very well for us in the amount of damage that we could cause against them. And they were just sort of able to run through our unit like that. We were able to do a little bit more in charges in them, but we could just never, for some reason, get them to break. I used my bribe on them to lower their melee weapon attack damage and attack ability. You see, it's lowered their aggression to 81. So it's actually quite an effective ability Hasdruble has, particularly when fighting units one-on-one. But it just, yeah, it never quite gets them down completely. They use shield bash, starts to cause some more damage on me. Unfortunately, Hasdruble dies at this point, which is kind of a loss, and they reform up, so I realised I better get out of here. So while we did decimate their unit, I think we lost that fight with the amount of damage we took. So I come down here, see if there's anything I can do. We're being capped out. Things aren't really looking quite so good for me. And I'm sort of now penned in by some phalanx. I know the game's over. The battle's now massively stacked against us. But I think we had a fair fight. We got quite a bit of damage in. And then we get completely taken out by some Greek cavalry that I didn't really see coming. What I mentioned earlier about the charge impact, as you can see, if we look at the aggression on these tier 8 Greek cavalry with their super long spears, their main ability is their charge. And if we look at their charge impact, is 447 compared to my measly 311. So in any form of engagement where there's both sides are charging, they're always going to win on a head-on fight. So that's something you really want to try and avoid doing. And that pretty much spells the end of my game and the end of the team. I think if we just fast forward to the end, we'll see that the rest of our infantry sort of get decimated, and our people making a valiant defence at base unfortunately end up getting cut down and the base gets captured. Oh, the last legion is fighting on. So I think it was a fair game. We did a fair amount of damage, particularly in aggression, and we got quite a few support points where we helped some of our teams out. We made use of some of Hasdruble's abilities in terms of his bribe. Finding that the support ability that he has at his second ability is not all that useful. It only gives sort of a very small increase to melee attack and melee damage, and I find not using it sufficient because once you're engaged in combat you can't use it anyway. Deep pockets, that's it. Yeah, 10% of defense, 12% melee attack. Obviously it's not fully upgraded yet, but once you're into combat you can't use it anyway, and I don't find it to be an all that much useful ability. But I am a big fan of the bribe. That's quite a useful debuff. It does quite a lot. 35% and 40% on melee damage and attack is quite a useful ability. So hopefully that gave you sort of a bit of a brief overview of how these Carthaginian cavalry play out. They're certainly a bit different from the previous tiers. It looks like the next tiers, the mercenary Hippitas, however that's pronounced, are kind of also a similar sort of heavy-ish type cavalry. They're a professional cavalry like the Romans. Before we get back onto tier 8, we go back then to the much more tribal cavalry like these Numidians, and then we see we get a massive increase in speed again. The movement speed straight back up to 8.2. Sorry. So yeah, that's kind of how it's going to play out for the rest of the line. I'm going to keep playing through these guys, get up to tier 7. I kind of want to know what the next tier is going to be like, and then we're going to keep going all the way to tier 10. It's kind of an interesting line to go down, I think, and I actually have really started to like Hasdruble over these sort of past 50 games or so now. I didn't think he was a particularly effective commander at first, but now I'm starting to get into it and I'm starting to like him. So, thanks for watching, guys. If you've enjoyed it, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel for lots more Total Arena content, and I shall see you all on the next video. Thanks, guys.